Did you hear? Two generous world families have stepped up with a combined challenge gift of $110,000 for the final week of our fiscal year.
I did hear. It's great news. They have already made their commitment, and now if you have not given yet, they're inviting you to join them and make yours. You may also remember that we began the June Giving Drive with a challenge gift that gave us momentum right from the start. This challenge, it's meant to help us finish the same way, strong.
If sound journalism, grounded in facts and biblical truth, means something to you, I hope you'll make a gift of support today. WNG.org/donate. Good morning. The politics of conflict from New York to London.
Right, two similar movements raising one big question. Does the West have the will to survive? Katie McCoy standing by for Culture Friday. Also today, DC's rebooted universe continues with a Supergirl who is nothing like Superman.
He sees the good in everyone, and I see the truth.
And listener feedback.
It's Friday, June 26th. This is The World and Everything in It from listener-supported World Radio. I'm Myrna Brown.
And I'm Nick Eicher. Good morning.
Up next, Kent Covington with today's news.
The United Nations on Thursday paused a rescue of ships trapped in the Strait of Hormuz after one came under attack. A Singapore-flagged cargo ship was hit off the coast of Oman. U.S. officials blame an Iranian drone. No one was hurt in the incident. The UN's maritime agency then froze its plan to evacuate thousands of stranded sailors and ships until it can guarantee their safety. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, speaking in Bahrain, drew a red line.
We see the continued flow of ships in this particular case. That lane is the one that's being used for this evacuation effort that's being led by the International Maritime Organization, and that must continue. And as long as it continues, they can have all the press conferences they want. If that stops, then we're going to have a problem.
Just before the strike, Iran's Revolutionary Guard had warned ships off of the rescue route. Several tankers turned back, others diverted. The strait is a major artery for the world's oil supply, and traffic had finally been climbing back toward pre-war levels. Iran allowing traffic to pass safely through the strait was a critical component of the framework peace deal with the U.S. On Capitol Hill,
we're going to have a little visit with you, as is the tradition.
Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen faced tough questions from a House panel on Thursday. Democrats wasted no time criticizing Mullen's leadership. In one heated exchange, Illinois Congresswoman Lauren Underwood questioned whether DHS is reporting deaths in detention centers.
Will you commit to reporting detainee deaths as required by law?
We do report them, ma'am. No one.
So is it your
I don't know.
Testimony, then
we report these. What you're talking about is what Congress has asked us to do, which we're not required to do, is report the deaths after they're released. That doesn't make any sense. They're not.
Mullen also testified about what he said were more than 400,000 migrant children who made it across the U.S. southern border during the Biden administration. He said many of those children were ultimately sex trafficked in conditions he characterized as horrific.
And as a father to 6 and 3 beautiful girls, when you see this, there's evil in the world. There's evil in the world. And we fed it. The Biden administration fed it for 4 years.
The DHS secretary also fielded questions about security for the World Cup. He said so far there have been some threats, but no serious issues. The United States is among the nations rushing aid to Venezuela after 2 devastating earthquakes. Back-to-back quakes, magnitude 7.2 and 7.5, struck near the Caribbean coast Wednesday evening. They were among the strongest in a century there. Nearly 200 people as of last night were confirmed dead, with more than 1,500 injured, and those numbers are expected to climb. Secretary of State Rubio said U.S. rescue teams are already on the way, and the Pentagon will play a big logistical role.
Because they have the ability to land in challenging places. Right now, the airport in Caracas is damaged. One of the runways is cracked. And so, but the Department of War has the capability to land in situations like that.
Acting President Delcy Rodriguez on Thursday thanked the United States and others for help.
Quiero agradecer.
Relations between Washington and Caracas have warmed considerably since the ouster of deposed dictator Nicolas Maduro. The U.S. Supreme Court is in its home stretch, handing down decisions in significant cases, with 4 more yesterday. World's Harrison Waters reports now from Washington.
In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled the judiciary cannot block the Department of Homeland Security from ending temporary protected status, or TPS, for immigration from unsafe countries. Earlier this year, the Trump administration moved to end TPS for immigrants from Haiti and Syria. The court's ruling allows that policy to stand, requiring immigrants to apply for asylum or leave the country. In another 6-3 ruling, the court decided that immigration law does not require the U.S. to process asylum requests from people who have not yet entered the United States from Mexico. Other opinions struck down restrictions on concealed guns in Hawaii and ruled a cancer patient could not sue an herbicide company for failing to warn about risks. The court returns on Monday, with 8 decisions still to come in cases ranging from presidential authority to women's sports. Reporting for World, I'm Harrison Waters in Washington.
The U.S. economy is on steadier footing than expected. The government now says it grew at a solid 2.1% pace in the first 3 months of the year, better than its earlier estimate. But your wallet may not feel it just yet. A closely watched inflation gauge just hit a 3-year high, driven mostly by gas prices. Gas recently pushed north of $4 per gallon nationally. But the Trump administration says costs should ease now that the fighting with Iran has stopped, and there's early evidence of that, as gas and energy prices have already started falling, though they are not expected to return to pre-war levels quickly. I'm Kent Covington, and straight ahead, Katie McCoy joins us for Culture Friday, and later, your listener feedback for the month of June. This is The World and Everything in It.
It's Friday, the 26th of June. Glad to have you along for today's edition of The World and Everything in It. Good morning. I'm Myrna Brown.
And I'm Nick Eicher. It's Culture Friday. Joining us now, author, speaker, and co-host of World Watch's Reality Check, Katie McCoy. Good to see you, Katie.
Good to see you guys.
Well, Katie, on Tuesday, we saw something really remarkable in the New York primary. Socialists in New York were not defeating moderates. They were defeating progressive Democrats. Even the very partisan Democrat leader in the U.S. House, Hakeem Jeffries, he is from New York. He was criticized by the local socialists as too soft. Now, at the same time, a Muslim writer for the Free Press has a very fascinating essay arguing that among some younger American Muslims, political identity is increasingly being shaped less by traditional religious practice and more by a broader anti-Western worldview. Do you see the connection there, Katie? Is what we're seeing in New York genuine evidence that the center of gravity on the left is moving away from the Western tradition itself and more toward a politics built around oppression and victimhood and resistance?
You know, Nick, it would help explain why so many far-left Americans are identifying in solidarity with a religion that is antithetical and even hostile to pretty much everything that they believe. So what this Free Press author did was he identified what he called third worldism, that the Muslim identity of people like Mayor Mamdani is that it's more of an emblem of resistance to Westernism and whiteness. So you think about that, we saw that at work in Ivy League institutions in the last couple of years. So when I step back and I look at why are these two seemingly disparate worldviews so in lockstep in American culture today, I think Islam and the militant left, they've got some common denominators at work. First, they both despise the West and want to dismantle the ideas, the values, and the institutions that created it. And that's even more than specific religion like Christianity or the family structure, although it certainly includes that. But there's another thing too. Both of these worldviews rest on a foundation of conflict. They both need conflict to exist. So certainly the religion of Islam is all about conflict. World peace is defined as global caliphate, meaning that they have the global domination of Islam and the subjugation of every other worldview and every other people. And then the militant far left, they also rest on conflict. You have the Marx dialectic that came from Marx and Engels and later was propagated culturally by Lenin that says that family structures, private property, capitalism, all of these things need to be dismantled. And in both worldviews, you see a pursuit of a cultural replacement. These things are working hand in hand right now because they have a common enemy, and that common enemy is the West. I have to tell you, though, too, Nick, we got to give Mamdani his props, right? I mean, he's incredibly charismatic and charming, and you kind of have to be to sell one of the worst ideas in human history, like one that has precipitated and been the on-ramp for some of the greatest atrocities in the 20th century. Because these candidates in New York, they are not socialists. I refuse to call them socialists. They are communists. When you hear what they talk about, they're discussing LGBTQ advocacy, that is dismantling gender, sex, family, what we can know from nature. They talk about freeing Palestine, which you don't have to be an apologist for the state of Israel to recognize the ideology behind that statement. So this is not just the infiltration of socialism. They can call themselves whatever they want. This is communism. So with the ideological Marxism that's rising on the American left and the promotion of this kind of third worldism, anti-Western thought, these two things are in lockstep together for now. For now. Soon, one of them is going to turn on the other.
Well, Kaylee, let's stay in New York just a little longer. Sometimes a picture tells the whole story. A former Israeli hostage stood before a UN official and said, "I am the living proof of sexual violence by Hamas. Look at me. Will you apologize?" And the official almost smugly sits there in silence. Katie, this seems to me bigger than one UN bureaucrat. It feels like a moral failure of an entire international system that found its voice for almost every victim except these Jewish women. What struck you about that moment?
Yeah, so a little background here. Welcome to the upside down world of the United Nations, where you have a so-called expert on violence against women. Her name is Reem Al-Salem, and she produced a report on the state of gender violence worldwide. And she left out the violence, the sexual violence against Jewish women on October 7th and thereafter. It just didn't make the report. She also conveniently happened to leave out the sexual violence and torture of Iranian nurses who helped dissidents in Iran earlier this year when they were rising up against their government. Not only did Iran punish the people who were trying to overthrow the government, but they punished the people who helped them. And it is absolutely horrific, not only the crimes, but then the gaslighting, the international gaslighting to leave them out and fail to advocate for them. You know, this is what we're seeing on that far militant left. It's the same thing at work. Because when you don't have universal principles, when you have a truly secular state, secular organization like the United Nations, I think we could safely say they are, you have no transcendent principles to hook ideas onto like universal human dignity. So all you have left are demographic categories. This young woman, this Israeli woman, was pure courage. She looked this woman in the eye and asked for an apology. And at the end, I think you could see her trembling. Just the courage that this took. But this is part of what common sense conservatism is up against, frankly. The United Nations, the European Union, our education system, the upper echelon of Ivy League institutions, they're all slanted in one way. So the United Nations, their Human Rights Council, I mean, it shouldn't surprise us. This is the same body that added Iran to some type of committee to make human rights policy. That's not a joke. But they really are making a mockery of human rights. And the reason for that is that apart from the foundations specifically of Christianity in the West, you have no foundation for universal human rights.
All right, Katie, let's move from New York overseas to London, to the UK, because there is a lot going on with Islam in the West. The clash there, quite a few things. We've had reports of a near beheading. We've had reports of a young kid being stabbed to death. We've had these reports for many years of the grooming gangs, and we just simply don't have the language to discuss politely what has happened over there. I'll simply say that as I listened to a member of parliament in the UK reading testimony from a brand new 200-page official report on the grooming gangs, I was struck by the cadence of the report, the way it was put together, and the way that he read some of those stories. He would describe an atrocity in fairly neutral terms and then say, another, then another, then another, and on for several minutes. He concluded saying he could go on all day, and there's no question that he could have. It's just devastating when you listen to him, and it pushes you to one of two ideas, I think. Either Britain doesn't have what it takes to fight this, or perhaps it does. And Rupert Lowe, the Member of Parliament, represents a flicker of resolve. What do you think about that, Katie? Will Europe remain the West, or do you think of it as conquered territory at this point?
Oh, I hope it's not conquered territory. We're seeing people in Britain rise up and protest against their government, in some cases riots. You know, there's a couple of stories with these grooming gangs, and just fair warning to anybody who would read about them, it is enraging, and it should be. This is a civilizational clash with a religion that is married to a political ideology. And this religion, Islam, I'm not saying Muslims, I'm saying Islam, is fundamentally incompatible with religious pluralism and the West. But you know, Nick, I actually think that that is only the secondary story here. I think the outrage rests in the institutional failure of a government to fulfill its basic social contract with its own people. Men in British communities were drugging, trafficking, and raping young girls, and law enforcement was punishing whistleblowers, blaming the victims, and calling them child prostitutes who made bad lifestyle choices. And they did this because they were afraid of being racist. And keep in mind, this happened under multiple governments. This was not a new thing. This goes back decades, which tells you that it evolved. These rings evolved, and they became more and more prevalent and sophisticated because they knew they would get away with it. So what does this tell us? It tells us that in the pyramid of victimhood, ethnicity is weighted heavier than gender. It reminds me of the verses in Proverbs that says a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. The principle there being two different types of so-called justice, two different standards. And it's also why just this week, Ayaan Hirsi Ali said there is no alternative to what the Christian Western civilization has built. So these stories, they are genuinely alarming. There, but for the grace of God and a few amendments, go we. And speaking out against them is only part of what we have to do to keep ourselves from becoming like Europe. What gave rise to this is their secularization. It was moving away from the influence of Christianity, to say nothing of the prevalence of Christians in public office in their country. Yes, we need to confront ideas. Yes, we need to combat threats, but that's not enough. We have to recover a moral framework that comes from the Christian faith shaping a culture's laws and ethics. And that is our task if we are going to pass on to the next generation a secure America.
Author, speaker, and co-host of World Watch's Reality Check, Katie McCoy. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks for having me.
Additional support comes from Ascend by Unbound, a real-world faith-centered college alternative for gap year, trades, and degree-seeking students. More at beunbound.us/world. From Asbury University, where students grow in Christ, prepare for careers, and build lifelong connections in Kentucky or online, asbury.edu. And from Nuggets of Wisdom, digital homeschool curriculum, unit studies, and educational resources for growing minds. nuggets-of-wisdom.com.
Today is Friday, June 26th. Thank you for turning to World Radio to help start your day. Good morning. I'm Nick Eicher.
And I'm Myrna Brown. Coming next on The World and Everything in It, a new twist on a classic superhero. Warner Brothers DC Studios releases Supergirl this weekend, introducing audiences to Superman's edgy cousin. World's arts and culture editor Collin Garbarino now with his thoughts.
Supergirl is the follow-up to last summer's Superman and the second installment in DC Studios' recently rebooted DC Universe. British actress Millie Alcock plays Supergirl, who goes by the name Kara Zor-El. She might be Superman's cousin, but she didn't have the luxury of growing up with a loving family in Kansas. This Kryptonian carries a world of sorrows.
I'm worried you're not going to find your people.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, Clark. I have no people.
The film opens with Kara celebrating her 23rd birthday, getting drunk in a bar on an alien planet. She's started hanging out on planets with red suns, which sap her of her superpowers. She's running from the responsibility that being Supergirl requires. Maybe she just wants to live a normal life, one that allows her to feel physical pain.
Oh, that might be a problem.
But in the midst of Kara's intergalactic pub crawl, she meets a young girl named Ruthie. Ruthie's parents were killed by the leader of a gang called the Brigands, and she believes that with Kara's help, she can get revenge. Initially, Kara has no interest in getting involved in someone else's quarrel, but circumstances drag her into Ruthie's quest for vengeance.
Revenge. It won't take your pain away.
This story might sound familiar to some listeners. Supergirl is based on the comic book series Supergirl World of Tomorrow, which in turn was inspired by Charles Portis's classic True Grit and its film adaptations. Ruthie serves as the indomitable Maddie Ross, and Supergirl is her grizzled Rooster Cogburn. It might sound strange to restage True Grit in outer space with a 20-something blonde girl filling the role made famous by John Wayne, but the overall story arc was satisfying. The journey with Ruthie changes Kara. She goes from being hopeless and self-absorbed to embracing the responsibility required of someone with enormous powers. However, she's still going to have more of an edge to her than her more famous cousin.
He sees the good in everyone. And I see the truth.
Supergirl also introduces the alien bounty hunter Lobo, played by Jason Momoa. Momoa used to play Aquaman in the previous incarnation of the DC franchise. He seems to be having fun with this new character, chewing the scenery as he chomps a cigar. He represents power unhinged from moral responsibility, the kind of person Kara might have developed into if she hadn't met Ruthie.
I'm looking for a brigand. Goes by the name of Drum Baxton.
In the last few months, Millie Alcock has caused some consternation among fans who have cringed at some of her public statements. But the movie isn't burdened with a left-wing agenda like many feared. Alcock brings an appealing rock and roll vibe to the character, and the film turns out to be a straightforward space cowboy adventure. At only an hour and 47 minutes, it doesn't contain the typical bloat and setup you get with most comic book movies. It manages to seamlessly tell Kara's origin story without getting bogged down. I was also impressed by how the film handled the perennial problems associated with such a powerful central character. It's difficult for a story to build meaningful conflict when its protagonist possesses a list of abilities that make her almost invincible. This script puts her in numerous situations in which either her powers fail her or she can't use them effectively. In this film that explores the galaxy's gritty underbelly, Kara won't be able to save everyone.
You cannot give up on me.
But I'm sad to say this isn't a top-tier superhero movie. James Gunn, who directed Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy movies, is currently serving as the head of DC Studios. And while he didn't direct this movie, his fingerprints are all over it. The visuals of DC's alien worlds look remarkably like those featured in Gunn's Guardian movies. The dialogue aims for that snappy irony in Gunn's films, and each big moment begins with a pop music needle drop, another of Gunn's signature moves. The best superhero movies all have memorable scores. No such thing here. These kinds of tricks are getting a little stale. Another disappointment? The action sequences. I'm guessing Alcock wasn't hired for her physicality because the camera often pans away during her fight scenes.
Okay, this does not look like this is gonna end well. For you guys. I mean, anybody want to leave?
Superhero movies tend to embody our God-given desire to see justice roll down, and this movie is no exception. We even get what's almost become commonplace in superhero movies, the hero's metaphorical resurrection before exacting justice. Despite its problems, I was more or less satisfied with how Supergirl turned out. However, superhero fatigue is real, so Supergirl might struggle to find an audience. But if you think a mashup of True Grit and Guardians of the Galaxy sounds appealing, this might be the movie for you. I'm Collin Garbarino.
Next up, Double Take is back with a new season. And we've got some terrific episodes coming up this summer. You won't want to miss any of them. We're starting tomorrow with a story from World's Kim Henderson.
Yeah, it's a story about a young reporter at a conservative website in Alabama. It's called 1819 News. One day back in 2023, Craig Monger was sitting at home when he got a tip. It came with 2 photographs. One of them was of a Baptist pastor who was also mayor of a town called Smith Station. His name, Bubba Copeland. The other was of a man in women's clothing. Monger's boss told him,
"We're being told this is the same person. We need you to find it out."
Munger's story on 1819 News prompted a round of pearl clutching from the high priests of journalism, sent shockwaves through a community, and ended with gut-wrenching consequences. Double Take host Les Sillers now for a brief preview.
Can you tell us briefly what the Bubba Copeland story is for our audience who hasn't heard of it before?
Well, it's really the story of someone leading a double life and the consequences not only for him, but for everyone around him. At the same time, it's the story of a news organization and one reporter in particular as they grapple with what's going to happen once the story becomes public. They knew there was going to be fallout, and there was.
So what did you think of Craig and how he handled himself?
Craig's a very grounded guy, and I believe he was the right reporter for this story. And I think listeners will understand what I mean by that as they get to know him in the episode. He reported what he discovered, understanding it was going to be controversial, but the backlash was severe, and he was grieved over some things that happened. Really, the whole organization felt the weight of this story, but if they hadn't published it, who would have? Somebody had to take it on, and I've thought about that a lot, and I keep coming back to the fact that reporters play a vital role in holding people and institutions accountable. That's really an important part of this story, and it shouldn't be overlooked.
Well, you did a terrific job on this story, Kim. It's an incredibly compelling piece about a very, very sad situation. So thanks for your work on this, and I think people are really going to enjoy the story.
I hope so, Les. Thanks so much.
Good morning. This is The World and Everything in It from listener-supported World Radio. I'm Myrna Brown.
And I'm Nick Eicher. A clarification now on a story we ran yesterday on forever chemicals. We said that Teflon, a synthetic chemical used in nonstick cookware, is highly toxic. Now, Teflon is generally considered safe under normal cooking temperatures, but can be harmful when overheated.
All right, and now it's time for listener feedback for the month of June. Matt Brown listens in southern Arizona, and he found the conversation with retired Lieutenant Colonel Mike Nelson on June 16th helpful. We discussed the memorandum of understanding with Iran.
I think the way he articulates issues regarding the conflict with Iran are spot on, and I think he frames this conversation and this perspective in a way that really does give us pause and a reason to pray and not to have unrealistic expectations.
Others wrote to say they disagreed with Lieutenant Colonel Nelson and found themselves more in line with Clifford May at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
And Jeanette Pylan from Northeast Ohio had some thoughts on a metaphor John Stonestreet used during Culture Friday 3 weeks ago.
When he was explaining politics' place in today's American culture as being a table with very wobbly legs, I just found that idea to be hitting the nail right on the head. It reminded me of an idea that Carl Trueman has written about, that in a secular world where God is eliminated or ignored, people begin to prop up themselves as the ultimate authority on morals, and thus treating themselves as God. So it seems to me that this wobbly table that John Stonestreet was talking about, this wobbly table of politics being king in our American culture, is just another attempt to create some moral compass or a God to rule those who have decided to reject the true God.
Adam Hines from Dallas got in touch with us about Culture Friday 2 weeks ago. We discussed a social media influencer and his wife who aborted their baby who'd been diagnosed with Down syndrome.
This is a heartbreaking and, unfortunately, and all too often occurrence, as was addressed. My brother-in-law had Down syndrome and passed away suddenly 1 year ago at the age of 44. We cannot put into words fully what a gift he was. His joy of life and love for others quickly brings us to focus of what is actually important. I often think of Hebrews 13, 1 through 2, when thinking about our relationship with kids with Down syndrome. I think most people tend to treat them as strangers to this world. It says, "Let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware."
Lita Powell from New Mexico phoned in this comment.
I am calling regarding Seth Trout's piece on June 18th, before Father's Day. I thought it was a great piece. It reminded me of how important our fathers are. I sent the piece to all my kids as an encouragement to them.
Patty Hall from New Hampshire was encouraged by Janie B. Cheney's commentary about adult caregiving.
I've worked as a nurse for nearly 20 years, and my last 2 jobs were in home hospice and as a private duty caregiver. I am so thankful that many Christians are beginning to give end-of-life issues as much attention and thought as we have given preborn life for the past 50 years. I want to thank Mrs. Cheney for discussing this hard topic and for encouraging all of us to reframe our thoughts about what a burden is and how we are to approach our burdens as we strive to follow Christ more closely. I have seen so much dignity given to both the person who is dependent or a burden, as well as those providing care for that dependent person, and it breaks my heart that our society has decided death is a better option. I want to thank all of you for your tireless work to bring us opinions like this that challenge us to walk more closely with our Savior.
Janie's commentary on the 17th on fixing our own food at home brought a good-natured reply from a blind listener of ours who described his own culinary skills as, his words, terrible. And then he insisted we not be so hard on people like him who can only heat up the frozen chosen in the microwave and enjoy the food that friends bring over.
And that's listener feedback for the month of June.
Well, now it's time to name the crew who helped out with this week's programs. Jenny Ruff, David Bonson, Mary Muncy, Joe Rigney, Lauren Smith, Mary Reichert, Becca Bernhardt, Hunter Baker, Cal Thomas, Daniel Darling, Collin Garbarino, Katie McCoy, and Josh Gagne. Thanks also to our breaking news crew, Kent Covington, Steve Klosterman, Travis Kircher, Daniel Devine, and Christina Grube. And thanks to the guys who are up late so your program is ready early. Tech producers Benj Eicher, Carl Peets, and Johnny Franklin. Harrison Waters is Washington producer. Kristen Flavin is features editor. Emma Eicher is assistant producer. Lindsay Mast is producer. And I'm executive producer Nick Eicher.
And I'm Myrna Brown. The world and everything in it comes to you from World Radio. World's mission is biblically objective journalism that informs, educates, and inspires. The Bible says, I appeal to you, brothers, to watch out for those who cause divisions and create obstacles, contrary to the doctrine that you have been taught. Avoid them, for such persons do not serve our Lord Christ, but their own appetites, and by smooth talk and flattery they deceive the hearts of the naive. For your obedience is known to all, so that I rejoice over you. But I want you to be wise as to what is good and innocent as to what is evil. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you. Verses 17 through 20 of Romans 16. Sunday's coming. Get to a Bible-believing church and let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. And don't forget, sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. And Lord willing, we'll meet you right back here on Monday. Go now in grace and peace.